Yeah, Cody. I don't need a mic as much as I hate to admit that. I'm loud enough. But I'm excited to be here and see so many people in this session. Cody keeps reminding me the last couple weeks that this is BioDiesel 101, and not to leak out any of the secrets from any of the other sessions that you're here to listen to this week, whether it be the OEMs and the vehicle showcase, the expo hall, and all of the great people that we've got presenting there, and the wealth of knowledge that's here this week. I cannot tell you, whether it be Cody and Don sitting up here on stage with me today, or any of the other staff members that you'll see this week. Again, whatever questions you walk out of here today from this session, if you walk out at the end of this week with questions still, you haven't done your part. We're here to help you in any way possible. Cody mentioned earlier BioDiesel Connect. And so, again, smartphones, tablets, laptops, please be sure as you go session to session, log in to that session you're in. Again, we're drawing $50 gift cards for those sessions. I've got the answers here that I'm going to hide for a minute. Make sure you've got to stay and listen to the boring technical guy for the last few minutes before the reception tonight. But I'd also like to, Don thanked a lot of people. I'd also like to thank a lot of the next generation scientists for BioDiesel. Again, we've got quite a few of students here this week. They're going to have poster sessions with a lot of their work ongoing here. Please take a moment, stop by, look and see what they're doing. That's the next generation. Again, they're in school today. But they're going to be sitting in these seats here in a couple years with real jobs. Trust me, guys, if they come. And they're going to be taking on where we're leaving off today, some of the work that we're doing. It really is exciting. I can't tell you how much I'm thrilled with my job and what we do. So I'm a petroleum chemist. I came from the dark side. Yes, it's true. And been working on renewables now, particularly biodiesel. I've been involved in the industry for probably 15, 16 years. Cody mentioned the National Biodiesel Board as a trade association was actually formed before there was an industry. There wasn't a producer out there in the country. There was nobody selling, nobody marketing, nobody even thinking about using before the National Biodiesel Board was formed. And it was formed because of the forethought of some farmers out there here across the country with an excess of feedstocks, primarily soybean oil, saying, what are we going to do? And it ties in, it really is a great message how the production of biodiesel from those, what are really, at the time, were considered a waste product. Everybody wanted the protein. They wanted the meal. That's what you feed the cows and the pigs and the chickens. And that's what you're buying at the grocery store. Nobody lives off of salad dressing. Trust me, I'm a meat and potatoes guy myself. But that meat that you're eating has to eat something else. And so it's that circle of life, really, that's brought about an industry now that's well over 2.5 billion gallons a year, as Cody showed you. And so it really is an important understanding. We are a diesel fuel replacement, but I think it's important to understand, again, why we were created and for what purpose, all the way back to the beginnings of the diesel engine. And so many of you may know that the diesel engine was created by a gentleman named Rudolf Diesel. And he unveiled his new engine at the World's Fair in Paris over 100 years ago. And there was no such thing as diesel fuel to run on. That's not where it came from. There was no diesel fuel for it. His engine operated on peanut oil. It was vegetable oil. And he developed that engine specifically for farmers who could then grow their own fuel and use it on their farms. And so there have been a lot of modifications to that original engine. In fact, you wouldn't recognize it today. Cars and vehicles, there have been so many modifications, emissions after treatments, pre-treatments on vehicles, that a diesel engine today is different than it was just 3 or 4 years ago, even. And so fuels keep changing as well. You know, a lot of people think that biodiesel and renewable diesel, we're the new kids on the block. I'd argue we're probably one of the more established fuels in the marketplace. Like I say, Cody's chart, biodiesel really began commercial production back in the late 90s. That's back when diesel fuel was actually high sulfur. Diesel fuel has changed from high sulfur to low sulfur to now what is called ULSD, or ultra low sulfur fuel. So diesel fuel's had more changes to it than biodiesel has over the last 15, 20 years. And as I mentioned, today's engines keep changing. Now with ultra-low sulfur fuels, there are more and more after treatments. There are DPFs, diesel particulate filters, SCR, selective catalytic reduction after treatments. They're all designed to make the emissions from the diesel engine more efficient and cleaner than ever, as Don has talked about. And so it is important. The staff at the National Biodiesel Board, we all work together, whether it's Cody and Jessica and Caleb in communications, or Don in sustainability, our federal affairs team, state regulatory affairs team. The job that each of us does is so intertwined, and we rely upon one another to improve the industry, and they really all do work together. So, Cody showed it's not hard to make biodiesel. In fact, if we had a jar here, some soybean oil, a little bit of alcohol that we'll have later, simple catalyst, we could make biodiesel in a jar right here for you, right now. It's not rocket science. But when I tell you that companies like NASA and Boeing are using biodiesel in their daily work, you can argue with the next person that tells you it's not rocket science. Yeah, it is. And that's part of what makes it better, you know. Can I make it in my garage, in my barn? Yeah, you can. But as Cody mentioned, you may not have the assurances of the quality that the industry currently requires. And that's an important aspect. You know, that's what my role is at the National Biodiesel Board, to work with those oil companies, those energy companies, and those end users, companies like Ford and GM, ExxonMobil, Chevron. They want to be sure that anything that's being added to their fuel isn't going to harm them and their reputation, or what that fuel is being used in. You know, we often refer to everything we do on the on-road transportation side. You know, will it work in an F-250? Will it work in the Chevy Cruze? And you're going to hear all that later this week, and more from a lot of these OEMs. But I was in my room for a meeting earlier and thought about it. I was over here this morning getting the vehicle showcase ready, and they were moving some things in. You know, Cody talked about there are 2 local suppliers, 2 retail stations. Well, I got to thinking about, okay, well, how many uses are there for it? Within a half mile of the hotel. I looked out my room and I saw a cruise ship coming in the harbor. There's the train in the median here outside on the road using diesel fuel. There's the highway you came in on, got to the hotel, the airport. Off-road, there were several forklifts here in the convention center moving equipment around. There are generators here for the hotel, the convention center, generating electricity using diesel fuel. And then Southern California doesn't necessarily need it, but if any of you are from the Midwest or the East Coast, a lot of your homes may use heating oil. All of those different applications, all of those different pieces of equipment can use biodiesel today in blends up to 20%. And so that's what the technical program does, is we want to work with those interested parties, whatever their application is, whether they make equipment that uses fuel or they're just an interested party, to ensure that they can use up to 20% biodiesel blends without any negative interactions with what they're doing. I want to ensure that the performance of their equipment is not impacted by the use of biodiesel blends. And to date, we can say up here today that in any application you want to use it for diesel fuel, B20 blends oftentimes improves the performance of diesel fuel. As it was mentioned, it's got a higher cetane value, Okay, what does that mean? It means it's better combustion. As Don mentioned, that it's that improper or inefficient combustion of diesel fuel that leads to some of those other emissions. We improve emissions because of better combustion. We also can improve the lubricity. With today's ultra-low sulfur diesel, they have to add additives once it leaves that refinery. It's not an on-spec fuel today leaving the refinery because there are shortcomings today with ultra-low sulfur diesel. So there are additives to improve lubricity and other things. Biodiesel can do that as well. Forgo the additives, add a couple extra % biodiesel to your fuel, and you're better off. As was mentioned, Cody touched upon, again, we're increasing domestic jobs, energy security. It's funny, we're here in San Diego, but a lot of the technical program and other programs we've got are working with the U.S. military. Like I told you, it is rocket science. And so the U.S. Marines, if you're looking out across the bay, you can see Coronado Island. They train out here. And we've dealt quite a bit with the U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine Corps on their applications for biodiesel use, the Defense Logistics Agency out in D.C. And so they want to ensure that any new fuels that they introduce to their troops, again, are going to be what we call fit for purpose, and there won't be any loss of time or effort. So the technical barriers always pop up. They're never the same, and when we answer one of those questions, somebody gives us 10 more to answer. And so what we'll often hear, again, after having spent millions of dollars of research as an industry, one, to get biodiesel approved by the EPA, have the emissions checked, health effects. It's not something that typically happens overnight for any new fuel, and there are more coming after us. But all of those dollars help to go to ensure that there are no technical barriers. Cody showed you the graph. We've seen exponential increases in volumes over the years, and we expect to see more. We're knocking down those barriers one at a time to ensure that, again, companies like Ford, GM, others, their next cars, their next trucks that they're going to introduce, whether that be to meet government regulations on fuel economy or emissions requirements, we want to be sure that they're B20 compatible as well. So, companies, furthermore, on the quality side, we work with a lot of the truck stop operators. Of all the diesel fuel, the vast majority, as Cody mentioned, is primarily for the on-road transportation. So those 18-wheelers rolling down the highway are using 60 to 70% of all the diesel fuel that we make here in the U.S. When it comes, though, to the classes of trucks that are on the highway, obviously Class 8, big heavy-duty trucks, but you've also, like I say, are going to hear and see Class 1, Class 4 producers here, Class 2. Those are the cars that you drive every day, or the small pickup trucks over the road. Surprisingly, companies like those, whether it's Ford's F-250 or the Chevy Cruze or what was a burgeoning Volkswagen market up until recently, those vehicles only use roughly 1% of the diesel fuel. But when you ask somebody on the street what they think of, name a diesel vehicle, they don't think of Kenworth and Peterbilt trucks. They're going to think of a Mercedes or a Volkswagen Jetta that's driving down the road. And so we work with those companies. What we want to do, as I mentioned, is ensure that they're all releasing products out there that are B20 compatible. Some have a few more questions than others, and we're working towards those. But as of today, I would say probably 90%, over 90% of all the heavy-duty trucks approve the use of B20. And for lighter-duty vehicles, we're working towards that same number. We'd love to be at the position where we're at 100%, but with changing technologies, New after treatments. Again, diesel engines are continuing to change. They're going to change again here in the next couple of years. We're back to the research to ensure that B20 blends are compatible and will be fit for performance. Fuel quality in the marketplace then is dictated not at the federal level, but really at the state level. And there are a couple people here in the audience that actually their jobs deal directly with that. And so there are advocates like Clean Cities, American Lung, working with us. But also it's those state weights and measures groups that are out there certifying, not necessarily certifying, but checking the fuel quality at your retail pumps. So the next time you're filling up your vehicle, and most people really have no idea what fuel looks like, because if you think about it, you pull up to the pump, you grab the nozzle, you stick it in the tank, and you pull the handle. You never actually see the fuel. But those state weights and measures guys do. They're the ones checking the nozzles to make sure that if you pump a gallon, it's an actual gallon. That's what they're selling you. But they're also checking quality to ensure that the quality of the fuel out there. And we've been one of the very few organizations out there in the marketplace asking for tighter and tighter enforcement on our own industry. We don't want to see bad players out there. And our fuel quality, the industry's told us, has been improving over the years. Pilot truck stops, Love's truck stops, Flying J, TA travel centers. Those guys are selling to the truckers day in and day out. That's where most of the fuel goes, and they're telling us that our fuel quality's never been better. And so we're proud of that. And really it comes back to that BQ 9000 program Cody showed you, and the dedication from all of our producer members to produce a fuel that's in line with what the industry needs and what consumers want. So, again, I promised Cody I wouldn't share any secrets about some of the latest and greatest technical activities we've got. But there are plenty of sessions this week. Like I say, the vehicle showcase. There are some updates on ASTM activities, where we stand. And so I'd encourage each of you to attend those. Attend the poster sessions for the next generation scientists as well. See what line of work they've got going on. And again, if you've got any questions this week, please feel free to grab any one of us that we might be able to help you. So with that, thank you. Oh, Cody, you get to make an announcement.
All right, great. Thank you both very much. Appreciate that. Before we announce that, we are going to go ahead and have a brief time for questions. A lot of you raised your hands on you didn't know much, and I know we couldn't cover 100% of it, but hopefully we got a lot of your questions answered. But this is the time that there's no dumb questions, because later on there's probably going to be some dumb questions, so ask them all now, and no one will judge you in here. But you don't want to be like asking the industry experts in their specific field some question that you should already know. So this is your chance. We have it for you. So if anyone does have a question, we have mics in the middle. Feel free to jump up there. Since everyone's going at once, I'll go ahead and I'll ask Don a question. These are some of the questions that I get asked a lot. Is there a specific type of feedstock that is best to make biodiesel?
They're all the best, right? So the National Biodiesel Board is feedstock neutral. The ASTM specifications are feedstock neutral. It's all about quality of the fuel. If there was any bounds to what the Biodiesel Board represents, it's our sustainability principles and fuel quality specifications. Most of those are enforced by states and the federal government. The US EPA does have a list of feedstocks that qualify as advanced biofuels, and that happens to be the ones that you saw in the pie chart. All of the volume that we're using today are the feedstocks that qualify as advanced biofuel. California has its low carbon fuel standard. They assign a different carbon intensity for each biodiesel plant, and the feedstock can affect your carbon intensity. So under the low carbon fuel standard, the feedstocks compete against each other based on their carbon intensity. But they're all powerful tools to capture solar energy and put it in our fuel tank.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we got a question here.
What's holding you back? What do you see as the barriers to B20, much more rapid adoption?
A lot of it's education. People are hesitant to change for the most part. And so you've seen the chart. We've got growing volumes, and I think that's a tribute to the job that the National Biodiesel Board does on education. And as we get that message out there further and further, I don't think that there are a lot of technical barriers. A lot of them now are political. Again, we need higher RFS volumes, or we can argue about a tax credit or not. There are a lot of benefits, whether it be for emissions or improved ignition and engine performance on their own to keep biodiesel volumes growing. It's really about education.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
I've got a couple questions. Where are you guys at with pipelining right now? Do you feel like you're going to have to hit a certain volume before that's going to become an issue? Or is this stuff mainly getting splash blended and transported truck-wise?
It can be. I mean, there are lots of different ways to blend fuels. Splash blending is by far the most dominant here in the U.S. And yes, you can. There are some concerns with doing that, particularly for large shipments, to ensure that the fuel is homogeneous and evenly mixed. Pipeline movements, there are a lot of renewable fuels that aren't allowed in the pipe.
Yeah.
Biodiesel is not one of those.
Okay.
So there are some concerns with what's called trailback.
Yeah.
So any contamination that biodiesel in the pipeline might yield to jet fuel.
Yeah.
So Cody mentioned, the gel point, that cloud point of biodiesel is fairly high. Jet fuel doesn't begin to gel till -40. So I fly too much to worry about it myself. But we've got several projects ongoing with current pipelines,
Yeah.
the major pipelines here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so the current allowable limit is 50 ppm as a contaminant in jet fuel. That's probably right there on the border of where they think they can effectively manage shipments. We're working to increase that allowable limit to 100, and all the testing we've done has been at a 400 ppm contamination limit. At 400 ppm, there's no flight safety risk.
Okay.
And so, but pipelines are ultra conservative, and so being able to move from 50 to 100, each one has told us that at that point, they're happy to proceed with more biodiesel shipments on pipelines, particularly the multi-product pipelines carrying jet. But even today, there are shipments of B5, especially on the non-multi-product pipelines that don't carry jet, but even on some products carrying jet today. And we will see those more widespread, certainly by the end of this year.
Okay. And is there a product that follows or trails in the pipeline that is best, like to help pick it up off the side of the wall, or is it because we're leaving a trail, or is it because you're picking up stuff?
If you understand how pipelines work, there's no physical barrier
No, I know,
from
yeah.
one product to the next, and so they do slide based upon viscosity, but that can be reduced with drag-reducing agents. It really is trail back, and it depends upon the pipeline, what the diameter is, what the flow rate is, whether or not they're carrying jet,
Yeah.
what sequencing that they would want to use.
Okay. And one other thing, have you got a benchmark or anything on maximum allowable storage, or is there an ideal shelf life, or stuff that's sitting in tanks or anything like that?
We suggest easily 6 months. We've seen biodiesel, if properly managed, and I would say that for all fuels,
Oh, yeah.
not just biodiesel, even with diesel fuel, 3 years of storage is not unheard of
Okay.
today. And so that's probably the latest group that we're working with, those people with standby generators where that fuel might sit a year or two until it's used. We've got some protocols that have been written by industry resources to enable them to use higher biodiesel blends as well.
Okay, and is there a possibility, I don't want to take up everybody's time here, so is it possible to talk to you about that after?
Certainly.
Myself and Dan down there were in the standby power?
Yep, happy to.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh. Hello, I just wanted to know, were there any industries that you guys felt were ready for B100? Because as far as I understand it, is B20 sort of a, I don't know, like a Band-Aid solution until B100 can be a possibility when quantities go up? Or is there any industry that is ready to go with B100 now?
I can answer if you want.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So right now, the majority of it, the majority of biodiesel that you'll see used is lower blends. So B5, B10. B20 is something that we're really pushing industry-wide because a lot of our testing and everything is B20 is good, it's ready. The problem with B100 is one, you have different issues like the cold flow stuff.
Yep.
The people just, that scares them, and they say, no, we don't want to do that. But there's no real issue with using B100. So it's not that the industry isn't ready for it. It's that a lot of the industries are like Scott said, they're just resistant to change. And so it's hard to jump fully into B100 because there's a lot of little tweaks, little things that start popping up that you're not going to see in B20 or below that. And so, yes, the industry is out there. No, it's not being used widespread right now. So.
In addition to that, and Cody, that's a great answer. The only other thing might be the age of the engine or the equipment it's being used in. There might be some material compatibility issues. Mm-hmm. So whether or not those O-rings, those gaskets, those seals are compatible with B100, those issues are all mitigated with the use of B20 and below. Cold flow, really, and more of a regulatory issue as well. And so we work with the EPA's Office of Underground Storage Tanks. Okay, how legal, how proper is it? Can I store B100 in an underground fuel tank? So for a retail distributor, there's some issues there. If you're a single user, sure. Mm-hmm. In fact, we know a lot of people using B100 out there today.
I use B100. I came to work here because I thought I would get a discount.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, go ahead.
Hi. Scott, I want to thank you first for drilling down with the sustainability benefits. I think that's a great driver. It goes into the education piece, and I think that may be one of the big factors to sort of heavily influence it. I have a question about with Don for the RFS. If we're already at 2018 levels, how do you get the external driver to drive our industry? We seem to be, it seems like if we're already there and exceeding, we're internally driven system, we're all in the room, we're all pushing. How do you get the external driver to, how do you get that elevated so that those folks who think, like you say, if we've got the big rigs now going to B20, reason to assume that if I'm an investor, I'm looking at a 20% increase over the next few years if that threshold just got met, right? So how do we drive from the outside?
Well, I think EPA is relying on us to fill that void in advanced biofuel. We argued to them that our industry is ready. We've got the production capacity, we've got the feedstocks. Let's go to town. Let's increase the mandate for biodiesel, and we will satisfy that. And I think they chose to instead say that, well, we're gonna increase total advanced biofuel and let you compete with imported sugarcane and let you compete with cellulosic ethanol. They would really like to see cellulosic ethanol come into commercial production, and this gives them an opportunity to say, well, look, we provided an opportunity for cellulosic ethanol to step up to the plate, and if they fail to do so, biodiesel will save the day. So it's much less comfortable position for us to have to compete with that. We would be able to do much more if we had the certainty going forward, but I think that's part of why we are where we're at. And how that changes going forward, I couldn't say. But
interesting. One more. If when manufacturers warranty to B20, is it true that once you hit that threshold, you might as well be burning? You could burn B100 if they're spec'd for B20.
I'd argue no, but but with the premise that they warranty B20. We don't think they do. Our argument is that OEM warranties today cover parts and workmanship. So if you actually read your owner's manuals, and I don't know anybody who does, if you have a fuels issue, whether or not that fuel contains biodiesel, if you have an issue with your vehicle, with that piece of equipment, directly attributable to the fuel, it's not necessarily covered under warranty. Oftentimes it is, because it's either not directly attributed by proof, or they do it out of goodwill for consumer relationships. But if that diesel fuel had too much water contaminated, and that caused a problem with the engine, and they knew that, they checked the fuel, that's not covered. Likewise, we don't think B20 causes issues either, but if, for example, somebody got a bad B20 sample, caused a problem, just the fact that they're using B20 does not void the warranty for somebody like a Volkswagen or a Mercedes who only approves B5. And in fact, they've actually issued certified letters to their registered owners of their vehicles in like Illinois and Minnesota, where there are mandates and incentives that effectively make it above B5 everywhere. And they've told all their owners, hey, the use of up to B20 does not void your warranty. So you can go to B20. There have been several OEMs that have approved B100, or even companies like Caterpillar, who started off approving B30. They backed off to B20, not because of any technical reasons or any problems that they found, was because that's where we took the specifications originally. That's where the ASTM spec goes, up to B20. And so if you approve a B30, you really don't know what you're approving in the marketplace, so they just back that down. And so up to B20, we think we're good across the board. We have begun work with certain market segments, B50 up to B100 for use as a fuel, because today's B100 specs are actually only to be used to be blended. So it's another set of hurdles that we'll need to jump through.
Thanks.
All right, got another one.
So this is very new to me. One of the things I was wondering was, when it comes to creating B100, what is the most time-sensitive or expensive process with it? Is it like the catalytic activity or separation processes or the blending?
You want to try?
Well, I'll at a very basic level, I mean, the procuring feedstock is one of the biggest costs for our biodiesel producers. I don't know if that addresses the question specifically, but if we look at what goes into making biodiesel, I mean, just buying the feedstock is the
Okay.
biggest part of the production
So-
cost. And we've looked at that because people have always asking us, what is the cost of biodiesel going to be in the future? And one of the things we're able to argue is that we have so much production capacity installed already, and we have so much feedstock availability, that we think we can better use that existing capacity, and in the future actually drive production costs down, because we've already built the plants. We have to pay for the plants, but we're not operating them at full capacity. So that's one advantage that we can argue if we try and grow the industry.
Okay.
I don't know if that addresses your question or not, but
It did. So from what I understand, you're saying that it's just acquiring that feedstock that is the biggest expense. And then once we have it, then everything else has already been prepared.
And that availability of your feedstock might dictate what sort of production process you want. They typically, producers term it as low free fatty acids and high free fatty acid feedstocks. And so if you're dealing with a lot of high free fatty acid feedstocks, you might need a different metallurgy. You might need more stainless steel in your production technique. It's going to cost more. But you can then buy cheaper and cheaper feedstocks that nobody else wants. And so it's a trade-off. Do you want to pay more on your production technology or more for your feedstocks?
Okay, thank you.
Huh?
All right, some great questions. Anyone else? Okay, yeah. Like I said, this is the no dumb question session.
As high oleic soybeans become more widely grown, does that affect biodiesel at all?
I'll let Scott tell you that they'll make great biodiesel.
It would make fantastic biodiesel.
So we largely see a benefit. One of the things that's driving the development of high oleic oil is because the soybean industry wants to get more of their oil into food uses and displace some other forms of vegetable oil. We don't necessarily see that as a detriment. Biodiesel was another thing that was invented to use all the excess oil that soybean has, because as protein drives production of soybeans, we have more oil than we can eat. And so biodiesel is an example of something we've invented to use that oil for industrial uses. And the high oleic oils, the thought is that they'll be able to use more oil for food uses and displace other kinds of fats and oils. And to the extent that that happens, well, then those fats and oils that get pushed out of the food markets, then they could be used for biodiesel. So biodiesel industry only stands to benefit because the high oleic oil may make good quality biodiesel.
Yeah, we just don't expect that to trickle down into the biodiesel fuel markets. There's too much value in food markets currently. And so, I mean, if you go to the grocery store and price what a quart or a half gallon of canola cooking oil is, if you say, all right, double that half gallon, that's price of a gallon, whoa, that's more than I pay for fuel. Holy cow, how can that be? Well, because those higher food values don't typically trickle down into the fuel markets. But if and when they do, Don mentioned, he led me into an easy one there. Yeah, we're anxious for it. It'll make a great biodiesel.
All right. Well,
One more.
Oh,
Go
one
ahead.
more. There you go.
Yep.
The traditional biodiesel makers use the FEM method to make biodiesel, right? But then, are there any supercritical technologies to make biodiesel, and is anybody using that?
I don't know enough to speak about the details of that, but we do have, we've had some poster presentations at our conference before from some of our next-gen students about other kinds of process technology, but I couldn't tell you about the details of them.
It's possible. They're not really at that commercial level yet, but certainly there are some supercritical fluid technologies, processes that could be used. Purdue University years ago had done some work and actually created a biodiesel fuel they took up into the Arctic Circle and used with a similar process.
Awesome. Well, we are
Almost.
last question.
Almost.
Last question. We are out of time after that.
As you said, this is the no dumb question session coming from outside of the USA. I'm just wondering, in all the statistics, we never see groundnut oil. How is that coming? I think this is also a big sector of your agriculture, is it not? I don't know. I don't understand anything about US agriculture statistics, but somehow we never see groundnut oil. Is there a reason? Is there a technical reason? Is it that the Soya Growers Association is so successful in promoting?
I would guess it depends.
Just neutrally wondering.
Yeah, I would guess it depends mostly on what type of oil we have available most here. Soybean oil is the most prominent because we grow a lot of soybeans for their protein. We crush the beans for meal, and so we have a lot of livestock production in the U.S. We have a lot of meat production, which demands all that protein meal. So because of that, we have way more vegetable oil than we can consume in the U.S. So that's why we have a lot of excess soybean oil for biodiesel. We do have, we have had more exotic types of oils used for biodiesel. We don't see big volumes of those. Any of those exotic oils would have to go through a process at EPA to get a pathway to certify as an advanced biofuel, unless they could easily justify that they were a waste product or something like that. So it could be, and we do have a category that's reported by the Energy Information Administration of other oils. So there are small volumes of oils that are used for biodiesel that don't show up on our big pie chart just because relatively they're such small volumes. We used to talk more about things like cottonseed oil and peanut oil. And kind of like Scott said, generally those oils, when they're good quality, have a higher value for some other purpose besides fuel. But if there's an issue where they don't meet their specification, or they have some sort of contamination, or they've passed their shelf life, then they could be used for biodiesel. And even sometimes if you had production that was just geographically isolated, they couldn't get that oil into some other high-quality market, sort of biodiesel could provide an outlet for that. So I would say, without knowing more about groundnut oil and specifically what kind of plant that is, if it makes oil, we could make biodiesel out of it if there's enough of it.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much, guys. Thank you all for your questions. That was awesome. I have a quick note for the students, GSB students. It says, please come back to this room by 5:45, which is in about 15 minutes, and move up to the first few tables. So, sorry, Don. So students, 5:45 in here, and at the first few tables. But then we also have the BioDiesel Connect drawing. So these are Amazon gift cards, but we wanted to use Amazon this year because if you go to smile.amazon.com, I don't know if anyone's used that before, but it's Amazon Smile, and what it does is you get to choose a charity to donate to. And we have the National BioDiesel Foundation that you can choose. And so if you, it doesn't cost any more. It's not like a portion, it is a portion of your purchase will just go to support that charity. So you're buying whatever you're going to buy anyway, and you can support the National BioDiesel Foundation. So we've got these cards. Make sure to check in at BioDiesel Connect every time you go to a session, and you can win one. So the winner today, if she's here, is Sarah Mark. Oh, there you go. All right. But with that, we are done. And if you see any of us walking around, feel free to stop us, say hi, ask questions. Otherwise, we've got the reception coming up pretty soon. It's just down the hall and to the right out on the patio area. So thank you all very much.